Spider-Man is without a doubt one of the most popular characters in all of fiction, and even the average person on the street who has never read a comic or seen a superhero movie might even know who Spider-Man is, since Spider-Man is a part of American culture along with characters like Superman and Batman. It wasn't until about 2018 when the concept of the Spider-Verse started to become really popular. And the Into the Spider-Verse movie introduced the concept of multiple Spider-Man from multiple universes to the mainstream audience. While the Spider-Verse was an interesting concept at first, I think there has been a problem with how oversaturated the Spider-Verse has become. And all the Spider-Verse is used for is to introduce as many pointless Spider-Men, even though there's already way too many spider-powered people. It's funny because I think the first time the concept of a Spider-Verse was introduced, or at least a story where Spider-Man meets alternate versions of himself, was in the 90s animated series, in a story arc called Spider-Wars, where Peter Parker would team up with alternate versions of himself to stop an evil version of himself who had the Carnage symbiote. The story had comic references like Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider, and a reference to one of Spider-Man's alternate suits. And speaking of Ben Reilly, there was even a joke about the Clone Saga, which at the time was considered as one of the worst Spider-Man stories.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot. It gets worse.
And in this story, Spider-Man would also even go to the real world and meet Stan Lee himself, who was also voiced by Stan Lee himself. And then of course later on in 2010 there was the Shattered Dimensions game, where the main Spider-Man teams up with Spider-Man Noir, the black suit Spider-Man who's supposed to be based on the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, and Spider-Man 2099 to find some pieces of a tablet and stop Mysterio. And while there were some cool fan service comic references, the coolest thing was that these Spider-Man were played by previous Spider-Man actors throughout the different media adaptations. So it was really cool to see these actors who had played Spider-Man for different generations unite for this one game. And while we did get a crossover between the different movie Spider-Man, it would be interesting to see some kind of crossover like 90s Spider-Man meeting Spectacular Spider-Man. And also, Stan Lee would narrate this game as well. And then there was the Spider-Verse comic events that came out in 2014, which is where the term Spider-Verse was first used. And it was written by Dan Slott, who also wrote the story for Shattered Dimensions. And in that crossover, there would be a lot more Spider-Man like Miles Morales, Spider-Ham, and even Japanese Spider-Man. And the comic events would also introduce new characters like Penny Parker and Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider as she is called nowadays. And then finally, the Into the Spider-Verse movie comes out, which is what really made the Spider-Verse popular and introduce it to the mainstream. And now, like the average person knows what the Spider-Verse is, or has even seen this movie since it is one of the most popular animated movies of this generation. And even a C-list character like Miles Morales has started to make his way to the mainstream. And ever since, Marvel has been trying to milk the success of the Spider-Verse for all it's worth, and introduce as many different spider people as they can into the comics, which is how we get some weird versions. And I think that's the big problem with the Spider-Verse. The fact that it's become too oversaturated. And now, it's like every year, there is a new Spider-Person introduced. And it's one thing to say these are from different universes, but what's even more weird is when different spider people coexist in the same universe. Especially when two people also go by the same name, Spider-Man. And then you have those people that say that anyone can wear the mask and anyone can be Spider-Man, as if Spider-Man can be some kind of mantle like every other superhero. like if it's Green Lantern. And then there are people that are going to misuse Stan Lee's quote that anyone can be Spider-Man no matter what race or gender. Even though Stan Lee said that anyone can see themselves as Spider-Man and imagine themselves in that costume that covers his skin head to toe. And speaking of imagining, I'm pretty sure most people like to imagine themselves as their favorite characters. And even if a character looks nothing like them. Because that's just how it is when you idolize your favorite characters.
What do you think about Spider-Man caught on? Do you think it was really just the I can relate to this guy aspect of it?
I think there were a lot of reasons. I think perhaps the main reason was the I can relate to him. Because he was shy, he wasn't that successful with girls, he had to worry about his family. I think most teenagers reading it thought to themselves, hey, that could be me, you know. So there certainly was that identification.
Right.
But
this much of his face, Spider-Man's completely enveloped in his costume.
oh, you
So
know
there's
the
that
good
air
thing
of
about
mystery.
that?
Yes.
You could be any kid.
Yeah.
You could be black, you could be Asian, you
Right.
could be Indian, you
Right.
could be anything, and imagine you were in that costume.
Right.
So I think that made it relevant to everybody everywhere.
Right.
And that was accidental. I mean,
Right.
I don't think we planned it that way, but
Right.
it was very fortuitous.
You
And of course, there is the woke political side to the Spider-Verse. And that every Spider person that is created has to check a box. Because why not create original diverse characters when you can create a token version of a classic white character? An example being how every year there's a new human Green Lantern introduced that is meant to check a certain box, no matter if the character is bland or poorly written. Although it might make more sense for multiple Green Lanterns, since the Green Lantern Corps was established to be some kind of intergalactic police force. The problem being that there are way too many human Green Lanterns. While as for Spider-Man, what made Peter Parker special was that he was at the right place at the right time, and somehow he was the one that was bitten by the radioactive spider. It could have happened to anyone, but it happened to him. And it wasn't like a story about destiny, or Peter wasn't like some sort of chosen one. He was just an average, ordinary guy who was at the right place and at the right time. And not every superhero is meant to be some kind of mantle. And of course, there were some other spider-powered people before the Spider-Verse, like Ben Reilly, Miguel O'Hara, and even Mayday Parker. The huge difference being that they were well written and had interesting story arcs, and were more than just tokens. Which explains why they are still appreciated to this day. Whereas if now, every spider person introduced is only used as a token and to check a box. And even a character like Miles Morales was only popular because of media adaptations like the movie. Because in the comics, he was mostly a bland character. So, yeah, it seems like we are living in a crazy time where token knockoffs of classically white heroes are becoming the trend. And the Spider-Verse is no different. It seems now Marvel wants to erase the original Peter Parker Spider-Man and replace him with new diverse variants that have to be better than Peter Parker in every way. And that's how it is nowadays with most modern stories. Where these modern stories want to replace the original white heroes with a superior, diverse replacement. It seems kind of messed up to disrespect Peter Parker, who was really the original Spider-Man, and we wouldn't get Spider-Man if it wasn't for Peter Parker. And what made him special to readers was that he was relatable no matter what race or gender you were. Peter Parker's story was a human story, and anyone can see themselves as Peter Parker because of his human story. A story about tragedy, redemption, sacrifice, and of course, power and responsibility. So no matter what Marvel tries to do, Peter Parker will always be the definitive Spider-Man, especially in the popular culture. Because when people think of Spider-Man, they think of Peter Parker. So much so that when people have to clarify they're talking about Miles Morales, they say Miles Morales. Because when people think of Spider-Man, they think of Peter Parker. It's like how Clark Kent will always be Superman, and Bruce Wayne will always be Batman, and Peter Parker will always be Spider-Man. And to everyone, and even the average person on the street, Peter Parker will always be the one and only Spider-Man. And he certainly will always be one of the greatest heroes ever.